the next thing we are going to do is actually look for, or rather add Google icons to the top of our sketch area right here. So let me open up the final product again. Okay, here is the final product. Let me just bring it here. Okay, so we have these icons over here. Those are all Google icons. So we're going to add that to our application. Well, let me go back to what we're working on. Okay, to add Google icons, we can let me just open a new tab. Now you can go to fonts.google.com/icons. And we're basically going to add a link to our index.html. So let's open it up. And right below our CSS link reference, we are going to add a link. Okay. And it's a link actually to another style sheet, but that style sheet will be from Google. Okay, so we'll have to access it over the internet. So style sheets, and then the href is going to be, okay, so that's it. And you can check out my GitHub. I think it should be linked in the description, and you can get this whole website from. Okay, so it's basically just another style sheet you are linking to your index.html, which has all these fonts, all these symbols. Okay, so let me save that, and let's come down into our body tag, and right on top over here we're going to add a div, and then inside that div we're going to add a span for each icon. Okay, but if you're wondering why I opened up the website, so right here on that website are all these icons. Okay, so what you can do, or what you should do, is you click on one icon. Let's say this search icon. When you click on that search icon, yes, right at the bottom here you have the span for that exact icon. Okay, up here you have the different ways you can add it, and style sheets for this specific thing, but you should use mine so that ours is all the same. But what you're interested in is coming down here to take the span element from here. So we can just copy that and paste it right in our div right there. Okay, so we are not actually looking for search, but if we look at our image or the finished product, we want grid. Okay, and the name for that, for the grid, is grid on. Okay, so we can just search over here. So you can just say grid. Yes, so grid on. Okay, so that's the particular icon. We click on it, we scroll down to this place right here where we have this span element, inserting the icon span element. We copy, or we can just come here, click copy, then we drop it here, we paste it here. I think we can put this on the same line. Control save, and let's have a look if it worked. Okay, so we have it right here. It's right here at the top, so it is working, even though it's not styled properly. So our style sheet is properly linked, and this icon is showing. So now we can go ahead and add the others. Okay, let's close that, and let's also search for the second one, which is eraser. Okay, and we are using the one called ink eraser. So we come down here, we copy the span, then we put that below this. Then we move on, get the next one, which is stylus. this one right here, and we come down here and get the span element. Then we move on to the final one, which is palette, and we also copy the span element. Now you might or might not have noticed something, but you see that the class values given over here are all the same. You see it's material, symbol, outline for each of them. The only difference is the actual name or the actual text that is put in between the span element to represent each of the icons. So that's just something to take note of. So by adding all that, when we save, we can see when we come back that we have all the three icons that we will be putting at the top of our application. We want to go to our index.html. I think we're already there, and we want to change this ID to container. So we just want to use the value for we just want to use container in this case, so that we can use it across the different elements, our sketch area, this top part, and also the bottom, and set certain values for it. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is we'll go into our script.js, and now we want to remove this grid side value that we're using here, and rather set it in our CSS, and then from our CSS we'll access it in our script.js. So let's go to our styles.css, and in here we are going to create what we call CSS variables. Okay, so we'll come here and we'll use the root element, which is this colon root, and this is how we set variables in our CSS. As I've already explained, we want to set some of the values here. Okay, we won't only set the grid side, but also some colors and other stuff. We want to set it in our CSS, and then we'll access it in our JavaScript, okay, as variables here. Okay, so to set a variable, we use this syntax. We set it in the root when we select the root like this, using the colon root. Okay, then in here you go dash dash, then you give your variable a name. So we'll call our variable first variable grid width, and we'll set that to 600 pixels. Okay, then the next one we want to set is also accent color. We'll set the accent color to be hash 04AA6D. Okay, hash 04AA6D. So if you've noticed, that's the color that we keep using. If we scroll down here, that's the color we're using here, and we're using it here too. So we are using that as our accent color. And then finally we'll have our inactive color. Okay, so inactive color. Okay, that will be RGB 0, 0, 0, 0.25. Okay, let's put some spaces here. Okay, so that's also a color for when something is inactive. So from here we can scroll down and update these values. Instead of putting the raw value here, we can access a variable, and to access a variable in CSS, use the word var brackets, then you put the name of the variable. So we'll put accent color here. Let's save that and realize that nothing changes, so it means our variable is working. And we put the same thing here, variable, and we also call that accent color. The next thing we'll do is just put at the top over here the container class we created in our index.html. So we're just going to give it two properties. First, just the margin. We're going to set it to a value of 0 and auto. And then we'll set the width and we'll set it to the variable we created up there, dash grid width. Okay, that's great. So we have that for our container. Okay, then we need to come here, and what we are going to do is actually we want to give a class of we'll name the class top. Okay, and also we want to use the container class that we just created, so we're giving that to the top element or the top icons. We want to give it a class of top, which is one class that we'll be creating the CSS for very soon. And we also want to use the container class that we just created. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that, and then in our CSS we would go ahead and create the top class. Okay, so just below the container we just created, we just go dot top, then we put in the values. Okay, so we just have display reflex, and then we'll have margin, and we'll set the margin to 100 pixels. Then we'll have padding of 3 pixels, margin top. Okay, let me just copy this and paste it so we can move a little faster. Then we'll just walk through it. Okay, so we have display flex wrap. We need to remove this flex wrap and also this. Okay, so it's margin of 100 pixels, 3 pixels here, 100 pixels. The background color should be white, and a color should be inactive color, and then the width should fit the content, and the margin should be 6 pixels. Okay, you save that. Now, in order to take things step by step, we want to go ahead and just pick all these guys and comment them out. So I'm using control / and I just comment these guys out. So right now I have just one icon, so that we can deal with one icon, and then step by step we add the others. So right here we want to also add not a class, but we'll add an ID over here. We'll call it grid toggle. Okay, grid dash toggle. That's good. Can save that. Then we'll come in here and we'll have to select that. So hash grid dash toggle. You then want to just set some CSS for it. And the only thing we'll really do is change the cursor to a pointer. Save that and have a look. It's working. So finally, we'll just go ahead and remove a slider container because we don't need it now, because we don't even have it over here anymore. We removed it earlier. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is move into our script.js, and then we're going to pull these variables in and make some changes. So first off, let's just remove this grid side value here, and then we'll go ahead and create a new variable, constant actually. We're going to call it grid width, and grid width is going to be equal to get computer, sorry, get computed style. Okay, and then here we're going to go document dot body. Okay, then we're going to go dot get property value. Okay, and then we're going to now put in the name of the variable we want. Okay, so let's just do this. Let's save and see what happens. Because the width value is not set and there's an error, Control Shift I to see developer tools, realize that there should be an error. See, nothing shows. Okay, let's save. And I think the next thing we need to do is change. Okay, let's do it this way. Let's do it this way. Okay, so let's pull the rest of the properties. Okay, so let me just copy this, Control C, enter, Control V, Control V. Because if you look into our styles, we have 3 variables we declared. So we'll come in here, we'll change the names over here too. This should be called accent color. And this one should be called inactive color. Okay. And then we change the names. This should be accent dash color. And this should be inactive dash color. Okay, then we can just let me move this a little bit. Okay, we also want to work on the container here. That's the container class we've declared here. We want to work on it here, so we want to pull it into the our script.js. Okay, so to do that, we'll just come down here and then we'll add another constant and we'll call that container. Okay, I hope this is not too confusing. We'll just go as usual, document.query selector, and then we'll just pull in our container. Okay, and obviously we've removed this slider container thing, so we have to remove that also in our JavaScript. And we can also go ahead and remove this slider value over here. Then we would also remove our sketch area from here, because we are going to actually create this grid toggle. And the interesting thing about this grid toggle we are going to create is, as I think I showed in video 1, or if I didn't, you realize that let's look at the finished product. Let's bring the grid back. You see, to maintain this width, each of these grid lines has a Control Shift I to see tools. Each of these grid lines has a particular width. Okay, the grid lines all have a width. Okay, if I could just select them, maybe I could show you. But point a line, but just the point is, each of these guys have a width. Okay, so when we toggle the grid off, then we should be able to change the size of the grid by what we've removed. So that's what we're trying to do. That's why we're removing some of those previous values. Okay, let's move this let squares per side variable here. So the first thing we'll do is we'll have to add the constant. Okay, so we'll call that constant I'll call it grade toggle. It's going to be equal to document dot query selector, and what we're selecting is the ID grid toggle, which is the icon. Then we can just let's put the grid visible boolean value here, grid visible, then we'll set it to false. The next thing we want to do is create a function called toggle grid. And then in toggle grid, we'll use a ternary operator. So we'll update the grid visible variable we just created. What we are going to do is check if the grid is visible. If it is, we'll change it to false. Otherwise, we change it to true. Basically, this is how a ternary operator works. Okay, so we put a check here, a true or false check here. Then this question mark shows that this is a true or false check. So for us with this variable, the variable name is grid value. So it's already it's a boolean. So it will return either a true or false. And then how it works is that if it returns a true, then this first value over here is what is returned. Now if it's false, then this value is what is returned, and then that value is then assigned to this. Okay, so that's how it works. So this is a toggle sort of operation. So when it's true, it becomes false. When it's false, it becomes true. Okay, so we can move on from that. Then we can also get grid toggle. Okay, we want to change the style of the grid toggle icon when we click on the toggle, so that we can see that it has actually been toggled. So we use the same type of ternary operator, and this time we give it a value of accent color. If it's true, then we give it a value of inactive color if it's false. Okay, the next thing we'll do is then remove the grid cells, and then we'll create the grid cells again. Now you would notice that I didn't put a value in here for create grid cells. That is because I'm coming to remove the squares per side from here, because I want to be able to call it without using the squares per side. And the reason why I want to be able to call it without the squares per side is because the squares per side is almost like a, should I say, global variable, or the scope of that variable is already here, squares per side. So I don't need to call it in here. Okay. I only did that initially just to prove a point, but now I don't really need to call it in here. So I can remove it from here and also come down here and remove it from here. Okay. Yeah. So now let's go back in there. We have to make some changes to our create grid cells. We'll maintain this number of squares. Okay, it's equal to squares per side times squares per side. Then we'll remove this width or height to be equal to grid side divided by squares per side minus 2 pixels, because we are bringing our grid side all the way from our CSS. We've used grid width, which we are using to how will I say it, replace the grid side value. So we wouldn't need this line of code anymore, so we'll remove that. And then what we'll go ahead is obviously we'll go through our loop here. But then when we get in here, we want to check if the grid is visible. Okay, that means we've toggled on. Okay, so we'll check if grid visible. Ooh, visible. Is that correct? Visible. Let me grid visible. Okay, and then want to set the value of width or height. Want to say that it should be equal to, we use backticks, we put another pair of brackets here. We want to pass int because this is not an integer, so it wouldn't work because we want to do some calculation. Okay, let me type it out and I'll explain it. Okay, so pass int, then in here we'll put in our grid width, okay, which we are getting from our CSS, and then we want to take that value, and then we want to go ahead and divide it by the squares per side. Okay, and then want to go ahead, subtract 2, and then we'll put our px at the end, pixels. Okay, so if the grid is visible, we want to do this, and I think yeah, so if the grid is visible, we want to do this. But then next thing too is would also like to put my semicolon. Would also like to set the border color. Okay, grid cell dot style dot border equal 1 pixel. So we want to actually create the border stuff. So that will be 1 pixel, 1 pixel solid white smoke, 1 pixel solid white smoke. Then down here, I want to use an else if statement. I want to say else if not grid visible. Okay, so grid is not visible. Or another way to look at it is if this is false, this negates it. So false becomes true. Okay, so anytime this is false, this condition will be true. Okay, so another way to say it is not grid visible. Then in here, we'll go with width or height equal, we use our backticks. We type in something similar as above there in here, but the only difference will be, let's go, so let me just copy this, yeah, then we'll make the change. Okay, so let's say C, Control C, and we'll just put that up here. Great. Okay, so the change is we wouldn't be subtracting these 2 pixels from here. Okay, because anytime that the grid, we are setting the grid off, or there's no grid, we are toggling the grid off, we wouldn't need to create extra space for the borders, as I think I spoke about earlier. Okay, so we'll have to take this -2 over here. In this case, because we're putting the borders were visible, we have to reduce the width by, you know, the 2 pixels, which will be the width of the borders. But in this case, we don't have to do that. Okay, and then we can also set the border color in this case So grid cell dot style dot border to be equal to none. Okay, so we're just setting that there should be no border, because initially there would be a border if the toggle was turned on. Then we turn it off, there should be no border. It should explicitly state that. And finally, we want to remove this right here, grid cell dot class list dot add cell. Okay, because we've changed it up there. So and we don't always want to add that particular style to the cell. This time we are checking if it has been toggled on and off, and then we do that. So we don't need to do that. Okay, so finally at the bottom here we maintain this sketch area dot append child grid cell. So we append the child, and finally grid cell dot add event listener. I think this should actually be on top over here, Control X. So we should add the listener before we finally append it to the sketch area. Okay, so I think that is great. I don't think the value we deleted, the constant grid cells, is used anywhere in our code. Let's save and have a look. Okay, saying we have an error. Let's check JavaScript line 7. Okay, let me check it right down here. Can go to source, and over here click scripts.js, and we have it here. Okay, so this is the, okay, so I have a spelling error here. Okay, so on line 7, this should be document, not document. Okay, so say that, and still I have another error. Okay, it says it's down here. Okay, so width or height, I think that should be line 39. Okay, so what's the problem? Read the error. Okay, grid width is not defined. Grid width. So many typos. Okay, so I'm supposed to use capital W right up here, grid width. Okay, save that. Yep, this is what we have after saving that. Okay, so now we have our grid, our sketch area without any grid, because that's how we set it by default. But when we click on our toggle, it's not working. Let's check if there are any errors. Okay, so what could be causing that? Okay, since it seems like the grid is not getting visible, in the sources tab over here, when we click on script.js, we want to just look at to debug this, see what's going on. So we can set a point here, I think, yeah. Then we want to check what happens whenever we click this guy. No, we want to check what happens whenever we click toggle grid, so rather we'll put it here. Okay, so let's click it, and then we'll observe our different variables. Okay, so there, I guess, is our problem, since that we've not put any listener on this element. Okay, so that is the final thing we need to do. Okay, so right here we'll just go grid toggle dot add events listener. Then we're going to add a click listener, of course. And then we're going to go, that should call toggle grid, right? Okay, let's save that and have a look. Okay, let's remove these guys. At least it shows that stuff is working. We don't need this debug point here. We can close that, and then I'll just refresh. Then we have that. Let's click this. Great, working perfectly. Okay, so we click that, it changes the color, shows us that the grids are showing. When it clicks, it goes inactive, the grids vanish, grids show, grids vanish, grids show, grids vanish. Perfect. Okay, so we also want to change this our slider function a bit. We want to, since we created a we have the squares per side variable, okay, which we are using here. We want to use that in here instead. So basically what we are going to do is say squares per side is equal to this dot value, that is whatever value is selected here when we move the slider. Okay, we set that value to squares per side, and we are doing that because when we set that, and since that is now sort of a global value, whenever created cells is called, that's the value that's going to be used inside here. Instead of putting it as a variable here or putting it as a parameter here, which at every time we have to set it here because it's a global variable, when we change it in the slider, then it automatically changes whenever create grid cell is called. So that's the reason why we are doing it like this. Okay, so click enter and go slider value dot text content. Okay, so we'll not use the inner HTML again, we'll use text content, we'll use backticks, $, this dot value, okay, sorry, $, basically just this. So let's just remove, go like this. Okay, yep. Okay, right here. Okay, and then we, as you said, we're not using the inner HTML anymore, so we can remove that. And then we maintain these two guys, but obviously create grid cells does not take a parameter anymore, so we can remove that and we can go save. Now let's try that. Okay, this is working, and as you can see, everything here is also becoming smaller and we're getting more squares, so that's working. Okay, so if it's visible too, we can do our adjustments. Okay, so we've been able to cover a lot in this video. We've made this whole grid toggle work. So in the next video, we'll move on from there. And I think the stuff in our app looks like it's all around. We need to do some extra styling and some other stuff. Thank you for your time, and see you in the next video.